Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 185 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, and today's episode is on why do children set fires, and it is Thursday, the 15th of December 2022 as I record this. So, Happy New Year everyone. I hope that you had a great Christmas and a very happy New Year. So today's episode I just loved, even though it was a bit complex to actually write, right there, and that I mentioned in the actual content part of today's episode. This is just such a fun, proper forensic psychology episode. I was just so happy to do, and I just had a blast writing this, so I know that you're going to as well. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Researcher Digest, and because I'm re-recording this, I'm actually using one of the ones that I've saved, which is from the 13th of October 2022, and there's only one today. If you expect a lecture to be boring, you'll probably end up feeling more bored. Universities are meant to be intellectually stimulating, a place where people go to engage with a love of learning. So why do so many students report being bored in their lectures? There are many possible reasons: teaching style, students' levels of motivation, or the simple fact that some topics are inevitably going to be drier than others. Now, a study in the British Journal of Educational Psychology has identified another factor: students' own expectations about how boring their lectures will be. Katie Tam from the University of Hong Kong and her colleagues find that in a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, many anticipating that the lecture will be boring leads people to ultimately feel more bored. And when I actually read that psychology news section back in October, I really did take it to heart though, and I did find that if I ever caught myself thinking, oh no, this lecture's going to be boring, I made myself rethink that, and I made myself focus on that it actually won't be. And I think it did help. I think the only lectures I sort of dread, dread is a very strong term. I sort of anticipate problems on my applied psychology lectures, not because of their content. The lecturers are great and I have so much respect for them, but it's the students. And I mean, I'm sure other people will agree on the podcast, but there's always one or two people in a cohort that feel that they're smarter than the lecturers, and they argue with the lecturers. They argue with people who have done their PhDs, whilst these people are still undergrads. Me, I think that is so disrespectful and rude. Of course, think critically. I never argue about that, because that is so important. But really arguing though, so that I think was quite a downfall though, when it comes to lectures. in my own personal experience. But definitely though, as this is the start of 2023, definitely try and go at your lectures or even your day job thinking more positively. Well, of course, we'll probably walk in at the door and immediately go, oh no. But just try and go there positively and to think that this will be a good day at work or this will be a good day at university. Just hope. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And you can always leave a comment on the Facebook post at Connor Whiteley, Psychology Author on Facebook. And today's episode has been sponsored by the Forensic Psychology, Theft, Burglary and Property Crime. So this is just such a good sponsor for today's episode because today focuses on arson, and this book actually has an entire section dedicated to property crime and arson. So that really helps you to take your understanding to the next level. But the book also has lots of great information on the forensic psychology of shoplifting, burglary, and it's actually quite interesting about how people burglarize places because it's not as simple and it's not as dim-witted as lots of people think. So that is actually quite fascinating. And as always, everything is always written in my conversational and engaging style. So whether it's the forensic psychology of theft, burglary and property crime. Available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, your local library or local bookstore if you request it. But if you didn't want to buy a book, but you still wanted to give the podcast a bit of one-time support, then you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So, but that's enough of the psychology news section. So let's move on to the content part of today's episode. You're going to love it. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about why do children start fires? And this is just such a perfect episode to kick off 2023. Looking at a real forensic psychology podcast episode. I just love it, and even though this was a bit of a nightmare to actually write because I had to reorganise quite a few sections, now this is a really good, really brilliant podcast episode. So let's dive into it. Why do we need to look at why children start fires? Whilst I've written about the topic before, youth offending, when it comes to arson, is hardly rare because, according to the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, 1,200 adolescents and children were arrested on fire-setting related charges in 2020. Also, research from the Department of Justice shows over 50% of arson cases were committed by youth offenders. Therefore, this is important to look at because the vast majority of fires are started by children. And even though this is US data, this is very applicable throughout the world though, especially when it comes to the UK here. Another reason why this is an important area is because a deliberate fire setting by everyone often results in a death or injury and around $1.4 billion worth of property damage each year. As a result, if we can understand why children set fires, then we can hopefully prevent them and stop some of the injuries, death and sheer amount of the damage from happening in the first place. Nonetheless, given how much I hate a criminal profiling, as I explain in my book, I'm hardly surprised that there is limited research from a so-called psychology profile, but there is research showing that most perpetrators are motivated by instrumental factors, for instance, a strong desire for some kind of financial gain. Why children start fires. Motivation. Abuse and neglect as child fire-setting factors and what targets the children set fire to. Firstly, one reason why children set fires can be found in Root et al. 2008, because researchers found that abused and neglected children were more likely to be involved in a fire setting when compared to children that weren't treated in this disgusting way. Also, the researchers found that the abused children who set fires were more motivated by anger and rage, as well as more flexible in their fire-setting targets, with their fire-setting behaviours being more likely linked to immediate family stresses than other factors. Moreover, most commonly, children set fires to isolated woodlands and abandoned structures, but a 2015 study from Ekbrand and Ono analysed tons of cases of school fire setting, with them finding that many offenders engage in a fire setting to obscure school activities, commit vandalism, and eliminate evidence of a burglary. The notion of mental health in child fire setting. It was towards the end of this post when I realised that there were so many myths and misconceptions about fire setting and mental health that this just needed its own section so that we could really focus on it. Consequently, research shows that adult fire setters can be motivated by anger and rage, or they engage in typical behaviours as a cry for help. Yet researchers have also determined that certain antisocial behaviours, communication and self-regulation problems, as well as certain mental health conditions, could underpin some of these criminal offences. As a result of a person who engages in these abnormal fire-setting practices could be suffering from pyromania. This is an impulse control disorder with the hallmark of a pattern of a fire setting that functions as an avenue of gratification or to release their anxiety. However, I have to admit, the literature is so vague on this idea of a pyromania, and to be honest, there seems to be such a limited amount of evidence of a research that even suggests pyromania is a mental health condition that I just don't think it exists, to be honest, and I think that I think the literature agrees with that idea, because even psychologists like Robert Statnick, who has performed fire setting risk assessments for over 30 years, points out how he has never ever met a child that fits the diagnosis of a pyromania, because the very notion that a child has an innate urge to set fire is a complete myth. So again, I think this is a tenuous claim to say that pyromania motivates children. Additionally, returning to the 2015 study we looked at earlier, they also found that people diagnosed with severe mental health conditions and targeted schools had no educational relationship with the school at the time of the offence, which I would personally imagine sounds a little weird, because would have imagined they might have wanted to burn down a school because they were angry with it, but this doesn't seem to be the case, according to the 2015 study. In addition, when it comes to mental health of the youth firefighters, Michael and Slavikin 2014 found that this group of offenders often had their difficulties in communicating with the family members, peers, and people at a school. Then the social deficiencies could have a negative impact on the mental health, possibly leading to an amplifying of their fire assessing and behaviour, which could effectively co-occur with conduct or antisocial difficulties. Another mental health condition that is also of interest to arson researchers is a conduct disorder, which is characterized by a pattern of behavioral and emotional problems, including discarding others, as well as fire setting within intent to cause a property damage, is listed as an example of a problematic behaviour for conduct disorder in the DSM-5. Finally, when it comes to the children fire setters, many of them have a history of PTSD, victimization, and generalized anxiety disorder as well. Due to all of these are extremely common in this offender demographic too. However, it is critical to note here that just because a child sets a fire, it doesn't mean that they have a mental health condition, or that mental health is even remotely a primary cause of fire setting by children. Overall, I think, of course, mental health plays a role in child fire setting, because to say it is the only factor, or even a major factor, isn't a good idea, and it is very reductionist. Therefore, let's talk about some other reasons for child fire setting now. Gender and child fire setting behaviour. Furthermore, when it comes to gender and gender differences in fire setting behaviour, research and experience from Starlick shows that fire setters are mainly males, yet researchers are seeing an increase in female fire setting in adolescent populations, as well as there isn't any exact research at the moment on gender differences in fire setting, but Stonick confirms that younger people were set fires for the fuel as coping mechanisms for past egg experiences, and that they want to experiment with fire, with the psychologist saying, open quote, some kids will set fires as a means to self-soothe. Many of the children will have a history of trauma or neglect. Close quote. Personally, I would prefer to see more research into this area because there is just such a lack of it at the moment, and that's one of the things that I realised when I was writing the arson section of the book. Therefore, I do hope that this improves over time, and more researchers conduct research that will help us to really understand why they do it and what are the agenda differences. Especially as right now, I sort of feel like sometimes the research and the opinions in this area, it just reads like guesswork. Like, I know it's not guesswork because these are academics, but it just sort of reads like it because there's such a limited evidence base. Conclusion. In today's episode, we've looked at a lot of reasons for why children set fires. Some of them are related to mental health, some aren't, and there's a lot of evidence that mental health isn't as major of a factor as everyone thinks it is. However, the point of today's episode is that fire setting is a dangerous behaviour, and it is a potential feature of a mental health condition. Yet, without more research into the area, we just will not know where the full egg stands and how major any of these factors actually are, as well as clinical psychologists will have to be involved at some point, because even if this fire setting behaviour isn't part of a mental health condition, we will still have the knowledge to hopefully help the child to change their behaviour, thoughts and desires, so that they will hopefully set fires less and stop committing so much damage. That is the hope anyway. And everything good in the world always starts with a little hope. So, I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you got something out of it. I think this was a great way to start 2023 with a proper forensic psychology episode. So I always enjoy these sort of topics, and I hope that you did too. If you know someone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And definitely check out the forensic psychology of theft, burglary, and property crime. It's a brilliant book that goes into this topic in a lot more depth. But if you didn't want to buy a book, be someone to give the podcast a bit of one-time support, then you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ConnorWhiteley. So have a great day everyone, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.